All right, I think we're live now. So, welcome everyone. This is the first episode of Thinking Out Loud. We'll have Lorna Mitchell in a moment. I would love to take the opportunity now to actually let me just a sec. Okay, I'm just receiving messages from Lorna. So, I would love to take the opportunity to explain what Thinking Out Loud is about. Since the beginning of the spec, the beginning, I mean, since I started working on the spec, uh, as you may know, I've been almost working on this myself, and I mean, with some help from time to time, and uh, and I was like, we need to make it more community driven, right? So tooling is solved. We have an amazing community, and you can see it. It's a vibrant and an amazing community, but with the spec, it's a little bit different. It seems to be attracting less people. So what we did instead is, okay, let's just make this more collaboratively, right? Let's just try to involve more the community, the experts from the community, and so we can fix the problems, the challenges, not problems that we have there. One of these challenges is precisely the publish and subscribe meanings. And as you may imagine, we want to fix this, right? It's about time already that we fix it. So we thought like, who can invite who can we invite to solve this challenge? And we thought about Lorna Mitchell. So yeah, let me just introduce Lorna. Uh,
Morning.
Hello, Lorna. Good morning. How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
And
It's
let me just
nice to see
remove
you.
this. Me too. So I would love if you could probably introduce yourself. Maybe you want to talk about what you've been doing lately, and just so people know a little bit more about you.
Of course. Hello, I'm Lorna. I run developer relations for Ivan. We're a databases as a service company. One of the things we have is not technically a database, it's Kafka. So we work quite a lot with Async API. It's something that I use a lot in my demos. We see customers asking for. Before I came to Ivan, my background was very much in APIs, and I'm an open API spec contributor. So working with Async API is not too different.
So and also for the audience to know, on the latest OpenAPI version, I think you made a great contribution there that people may or may not know about. So you want to talk about it?
Sure. So OpenAPI, as of the 3.1 release at the beginning of this year, has support for webhooks, which is, I think, a real milestone, and it reflects how the way that we use APIs in the wild has changed. OpenAPI always had support for like an asynchronous callback, but you had to register with a previous call. And lots of APIs don't work that way. You know, you sort of sign up out of band and then you receive events. So it's that very sort of event driven flavor. So it's something that we've been working on for what feels like years. But it's now there in a real release. You can really use it. There are really tools that support it. And of course, it's got a lot in common with the Async API two-way messaging events sort of paradigm.
So I mean that's awesome, and partly that's why I wanted to invite you first, because I think you've been doing a great job on the async and the Open API community, and lately you were very engaged with async API community as well,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought like, we can't lose this opportunity to bring Lorna in, right? So yeah, just for the audience to know a little bit more about it, let me just share what we have regarding the publish subscribe challenge. And I should have opened this probably before. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so let me just show my screen. Cool. Maybe I should make it a little bit
A
bigger,
little
right?
bit bigger, please. I mean, somebody's
Yeah.
watching on their phone, right?
Yes.
And there's nothing we can do for them. But
No.
yeah, that's better. I can read it
That
now at
should
least.
be okay. Yeah, I can even read it in the little miniature there, so I guess it's readable now. Yeah. So just to summarize, what happens with async API, publish, and subscribe is that um, as opposed to what people might think, publish doesn't mean that your application can publish messages, right? And subscribe doesn't mean that your application is subscribing to messages. But instead, what it means is that other let's say clients, other applications, other people, other software can publish or subscribe to you, to your messages, right? So while on client server relationship, like one-to-one client server, like in HTTP APIs, this is obvious and this is like clear. On broker-based architectures, for instance, is not that clear, right? Like um, people working with brokers, which is the majority of Async API users,
Mhm.
um, usually what happens is that they find this confusing. And I'm always saying people, but I am one of these people. So I am myself like getting confused all the time. It's like, damn, it's like 4 years already almost, and I'm still getting confused about. I mean, not something that I did because that was inherited, but yeah, something that I did in the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's like
I think the first time I tried to work with it, I asked you if there was a map.
yes, and it's I mean incredibly confusing, and people was suggesting. I recall, for instance, before we launched um, version 2, I think it was a first release candidate. We switched the minute on the first release candidate of version 2. It was the opposite. Like we tried to fix it at that time, but then some other people started complaining, like, "Hey, this is not going to work for public client server APIs, like
Mm.
Slack API, for instance, or like many other APIs, right?" And it's like, you know what? Let's leave it as it is, as it was in version 1, and let's not touch it. And then we dedicate some good time and effort to solve it. So yeah. So I wanted to clarify this, and I think you made a great suggestion here. So for the users reading this, let me just share this with the audience. So
Yeah, there was quite a lot of good discussion on this, and I felt like
yes,
I sort of came to it a little bit later
yes.
on. But
So there's
feel like we're sort of starting to align on some of these ideas now. What do you think?
yeah, exactly. I didn't want to be like biasing people myself. I have my idea, like how can it be done, but I have to admit that it's not a very creative idea. I am not like
Mhm.
100% sure this is the best way to do it. And then you came in and suggested something completely different, and I was like, there might be another way, right? So yeah, and that's why I was thinking like, for this challenge we need to invite Lorna, right? So let me just jump. I think you commented on the initial one, right? On this from
I'm not
Michael,
sure. I'm not sure.
maybe.
It was one of those. I
So
started typing you a really long message in a Slack conversation, and in the end, just moved it over to the to where the GitHub activity was
uh,
happening. So
yeah, here it is.
did you find it?
So
Okay,
yeah.
good.
Yeah, I love how you start.
I have
Yes.
been confused every step of the way, and when I wrote this, I was deeply offended. Although it is nice that it doesn't come across really clearly that I was really really offended. because I thought I got it. I thought I'd really understood it. And then about a week after this comment, I was giving a talk about Async API. And because the tooling is really improved, I thought I would generate some code. And it turns out the point of view of the documentation generation is different to the point of view of the code documentation, the code generation. So the answer to is it publish or is it subscribe is it depends.
It depends. It depends on what you're generating, right? Because that's another thing. Like when you're generating documentation, it's clear you generate documentation. I mean, most of the time you generate documentation for your users, your consumers, not for you. You already know how it works. But for the code, you might be generating the server, or you might be generating the client, which is funny because there are no servers or clients here, and that's what we were trying to say all the time. Like it's all clients, right? It's all clients, especially when talking about brokers. It's all clients, and the server is a broker. Actually, you have to list the server on the server section, so it's clear like everything is a client. So then it's like it means like, are you generating the code for your client or for other clients to consume your client?
Right.
Just
And so I guess I have a question because I have mostly worked with the architectures that do have brokers, but I know Async API also supports things like the WebSockets. So how does that work? What's in the server's entry if it's a WebSockets description?
yeah, that's the whole thing. Like we cannot just change it, because if we change it, then these client server architectures are messed up. Like suddenly it doesn't make sense for them now. So it's like you probably think like, oh, it's easy, just change the meaning of the verbs and done, right? That's what we thought. And then it's like, oh, some other people like, my WebSocket API doesn't make sense now. Like how am I supposed, like it's like suddenly your async API file is not defining your API. It's defining the behavior of your application. It's like what your application is doing instead of what your application is expecting, right? So that's like a little difference. We can be like, it's a little, but it's tricky. We can be very like, how can I say it? Like we can be very strict here, or we can be very very strict, like in the terms of we stick to the definition of API, and therefore it should remain as it is right now because it's defining what it's going to expect. Um, but that's not going to be useful for the majority of the users and the developers using async API. So we then stick to the strict definition of API. I have my opinion, obviously, and I also want yours here. So, like, what do you think? Like, do you think we should be like favoring the user experience here in this case, or we should be very like purist here in terms of the API definition? Like, is it what we expect, or what we're gonna do defining the behavior? What do you think?
I am always more pragmatist than purist. It's the way that I think about things. And honestly, I don't really think it matters what we choose here as long as it's clear and well documented. Because currently, like I say, you end up at it depends super quick. And then it's confusing, and especially for people, and I think I would include myself in this group, who, I don't work with Async API every day. I'm not super familiar with new tools getting released. I've seen there's some chatter of some Go tools. I'm probably not testing them this month, so it's quite hard to keep up with the detail. And to my mind, and I felt this way about OpenAPI as well, it's about making these things really approachable, and making them as transparent as possible. And so it tends to be more about more about the user. And that's why I asked the question about how does the WebSockets thing work now? Like I've done a little bit with MQTT. I now mostly use Async API with Kafka. I see other examples coming by, right? Because I'm in the community all the time. But where there's that something like the WebSockets, which has a client and server, kind of, they could be peer-to-peer.
No, they are exactly, yeah. They're
Then,
client and server, and even for instance on socket.io, it's defined as server and client. So
yeah. So then I guess the async API spec for that use case is from the point of view of the client, as it is for the Open API HTTP specs. But it gets confusing with the brokers, because then the broker is the server, but we have lots of clients. So I really strongly remember the first time I used Async API, and I was doing an integration of some smart home stuff, the LEDs that used to be in the backdrop when I was streaming a lot, and also some other, I think it was the video lighting was on like a smart plug. So I needed to send 2 types of message onto MQTT, and then different things were going to react to them. And I couldn't describe both things in one spec because they were for 2 different clients. One was the smart plugs and one was the Pi that controlled my LEDs. But to me as a software developer, it was kind of like, here are the things you can do, like a list of API endpoints. I wanted like a list of channels and payloads, but it only makes sense for a broker, right?
Yeah, so exactly, it only makes sense for the broker. But actually, so what you're suggesting there is to see it another way is like a menu of options, things that you can do, right? Which kind of makes sense, right? Like, and you were expecting a single async API file to describe your whole architecture, not just a single application, but your whole architecture, right? And if that's the case, so we thought about it in the past, and the reason we ditched this idea was like, if you're a big company with thousands of topics and microservices, publish and subscribe, this file is gonna be huge, right? It's gonna be huge to process, right? So it's like and manageable most of the times, right? So we decided to follow like microservices, if you want, here also in the sense of how you structure your async API file. And it's like an async API file is described in a single application. But then there's the problem of you have, for instance, channel, which is the topic, right? That is common for both, for 2 or 3 or 4 or thousands of applications. They have a common channel, a topic where they publish or subscribe depending on the role they have, right? So then you have to repeat this channel description everywhere. And it's like, that's not very convenient. Like, how do you maintain that, right? And even what happens is that even if you will be able to extract it somehow, then what happens is that you can't completely extract it. Let me just show an example for people watching this. So an example of what I'm talking about. So just maybe this.
I just want to say how much I appreciate that Async API has examples. Because I'm not sure how well known these resources are, but I come here really often when I'm working on
yes.
So
we should be coming
thumbs
more
up
often.
for the developer experience of having some good examples.
Thanks. So so this is the channels part that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
This is the channel definition. There could be more things here, like description, summary, blah blah blah. There are many other stuff that you can put here. And then there's the publish or subscribe verb. So even if we use some $ref mechanisms from JSON schema that we implement as well, and we try to extract this channel definition to another file so it can be shared by multiple applications, what happens is that it has the birth inside. So it's like you want this, you want description, summary, and everything that it's not showing here. You want the message, you want the whole message, right? Whatever hangs below the message here.
Yeah.
But you don't want this.
No.
because when one is publishing, the other is subscribing. So it's like that part is not what I want. So I was wondering myself, and I want to have your opinion here. What if we just get rid of publish and subscribe from here? Like,
Yeah.
what if
Please. That'd be lovely.
so what if publish and subscribe is not here? Like the channel definition is just the channel definition, and then there will be other section on the spec, and I'm gonna just try to play with this a little bit. So let's just use this example that I have here. So I have two channels, right?
Yeah.
Very creative name for the second one.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can see, one is subscribe and another is publish. So what if this is going to fail? Because obviously I'm going to invent
It's not valid in current version of Async API. But what
exactly. What if you could be doing something like operations? I don't know.
Yeah, it's
and
fine.
Let's just invent a new operation which could be like on user signs app.
Yeah.
And then this operation is going to be, I don't know, let's just not use type. There are many types in here. Kind, subscribe. And the channel is, I don't know. For simplicity, we can do this, and or we could be using here something like $ref.
Yeah.
Right. So we could be pointing to channels, which this is gonna be fun because now you're gonna do this. Is I think it's something like this. It's slashes when you encode slashes on the JSON pointer. You cannot use slashes. You have to use this special syntax. That makes $ref here super inconvenient, right? But because otherwise it's gonna be expecting channels, user, and then some other object inside, and it's not the case. It's this key. But anyway, let's just put it like this. Okay, so it's easier to grasp now. So if we do this, we will have operations on user sign up, subscribe, and blah blah blah, whatever. And therefore we can just get rid of this, right?
But now,
and the operation is there. But
now, for me, what is missing from Async API is one of two things. It's either like currently Async API is every specification is for each thing. So my tool, which I have a button that sends what color the light should be, and the thing that understands the message that was sent. I need two files, but then you need a higher level thing to wire together all of those specs and make them understandable and help understand the relationship, which we don't have. I've seen some cool hubs. IBM have been demoing one, and it's to solve that problem. Alternatively, we could bring that into Async API. And I've worked extensively with OpenAPI, and that's much simpler because there are only two people at the party, and it's obvious who is who, right? So the spec is from the API description for OpenAPI is always from the point of view of one client, and there is one server. And that's basically it. There are some finer points, but that's the fundamental thing. With Async API, right, your architecture diagram isn't request response. It's potentially spider.
Yeah.
And so we need to name these individuals. I think so. My proposal that you just had on screen there is to have an actor, so that you can say,
Can you just maybe open Playground and share what you're thinking about? Maybe I think it's gonna be. I don't know if you can share. Let me know if you can't.
I can share. Hang on while I try and get only the appropriate windows shared, because that is always a challenge. And I think that I was partway. This is like, you're just like one more meeting in my morning marathon. So we're Playground.
No problem. No problem.
Async API. It's your lucky day. I have got my quiet keyboard plugged in. Oh.
So if I understood well, you want to have all the applications in one file, right? Like all the nodes of a broker, let's say, in one file.
Yeah. So if I try and share this, and I want that one. Okay. So presumably you can put that on screen. I've run out of screens, but that's a minor detail.
Can you make the text a bit larger, maybe?
Yeah, we can. Let's. How's that?
A little bit more. Yeah, I think that will be enough, maybe.
Okay, let's try it.
That's not gonna work as you. No, this is this doesn't work as you think.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Well, why? I want you to fix it immediately.
We are going to fix it, but in the new studio. We're gonna get rid of Playground anyway. So
I expected this to do something. I'd just move over. Okay, never mind. Yeah. So I thoroughly agree that, and I'm a little bit shaky on the brokerless solution. So for me, I work at Ivan, we do Kafka, and that's my context. So yes, this verb does not belong here. So we're talking about, on this channel, these messages will, on this topic, these messages will be flowing and they will have the following payload structure. So that just tells you what's going to be there. And that's what I expect. And for the broker-only architectures, I think that could be, it's not quite enough by itself, but it's not bad. And it wouldn't be confusing, right? Because you could use this and from a very sort of two-dimensional point of view, you can generate documentation that just details stuff and doesn't have publish or subscribe. But you could have like the code generation for generating a producer or code generation for generating a consumer, assuming that you would want an app that just produced everything or just consumed everything, which is probably not true because probably applications do a subset. But what we could have is, if I follow your lead and start adding stuff, if we have user signed up, user paid, and user message, and they all have, imagine, some different component messages. They've all got different payloads.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not sure I named it really well the first time, so I'll just diverge a bit.
It's a good example, yeah.
So then what we actually need to know is who is here and what can they do. I proposed actors because, like you say, we have too many types and groups and generic terms. So I've called mine actors. And in an API request response scenario, then you would have something like, client, and just sends or just receives or does whatever. So, but for example, we could have let me try and think about that. We could have the website, which is an actor. So the website is going to do is going to publish to an array of things, including the user, and these might need some sort of identifier. I've sort of reused the channel name, but I'm not sure it makes sense anyway. So they can publish to user signed up and to, but they consume. So when the user signs up, the website publishes a message. And when we send the user an email from the back end, the website also gets a copy of that so they can log in and check their messages. So it's I'm making this up, so we might come up with better examples later.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, but the payment gateway oh my gosh, I can't type and talk at the same time. I'm out of practice. I haven't streamed for ages. But here we are. You bring me these examples. In fact, my indentation is all broken, but at least it's consistent.
Just think about something for a moment. This is thinking out loud, so it doesn't need to be perfect. Let's just, as if you were in your desk yourself alone thinking about it. It doesn't have to be a show.
I don't normally talk at the same time. Then actually, that's a lie. I totally talk at the same time. I don't share an office.
So no problem. It's just this can be the most boring show if you want. That's okay.
It's all right.
It's for thinking. It's not for show.
Right. So this is my example that the payment gateway would know. Would publish that the user had paid, and maybe the website needs to know about that as well. So we can add it here, right? So it'll display it in the front end. So then we've got all these topics with payloads described, and then we start saying who can do what. Like who's here. In your IoT example, we might have sensors and then like the smart home hub, and then the actual little ion light bulbs. Then, and some of those are publishing and some of those are consuming, and one of them's doing all of those things. So yeah, just trying to think about that separation, because for me, not knowing if I'm the website or the payment gateway all the time in Async API, and some of the tooling takes the opposite view to the other tooling, has been really confusing. And this, I'm not sure if it belongs here, but this is how I think about it. In that, in Open API, there's a shortcut because there are only two people and only one direction of, not one direction, but one combination of channel. And in Async API, that's not true. So there's like an extra dimension.
So now I'm going to challenge your idea a little bit.
Good.
What if, let me show my screen again. So what if I do, oh, then this is really small now. Let me just put a little bit bigger here. Okay, that will be enough. So you have these identifiers for the applications, right? Like the website and all of that. We have this field here, which is already, it's part of this of version 2. Mm-hmm. It's called ID. And this ID is usually a URN or a unique identifier, right? But we can call it something, I don't know, like website. It shouldn't be called website either, although because I mean, that will be, ideally this will be unique, like globally unique, not just in your product, let's say, or your company, but yeah, that will work as well. So you will have a file where you have the ID describing how the hell is this person, how the hell is this async API file for, right? So it's for the website, right? And this one is for the website. Then you will have another file which is for the payment gateway that you were describing. So you will have another file with ID payment gateway, right?
Mhm.
And then you can have the rest of the things as they are right now, maybe just moving around operations and all the stuff for reusability, because I think it's kind of related, moving operations outside. And and then you might not need actor anymore, right?
Yes.
The only thing here is that, yeah, it can be less convenient to have multiple files. It usually is, but it is also true that most of the times different applications are in different repos, and you can have the async API file along with your application describing only this application, right? And then it might be the responsibility of the tooling to get all of those together and provide a hack like you were describing before, right? And show you how they relate to each other, right?
Yeah, and we already have support for things like tags that can help to bring those common things together.
Yeah, yeah, and in the case of so something that I like about actors, and I think I don't want to completely ditch this idea, so I'm challenging your idea, but I actually like it. And my only concern with this is how much it can grow inside a
Yes.
single file. So the more your architecture grows, the more your async API file grows. Of course, you can always start splitting it with other refs pointing to other files, so you can split it in the end and just have a menu, and all the other files are in different repos. But you still have some, like a kind of a hub, moving the hub concept to async API, like you described before. And that kind of, I kind of like that approach, right? But yeah, I will say that this is like what we're discussing here now. Then is it a um, like centric approach, like
Oh,
everything is on
hello.
the. Oh, I didn't know you. People weren't seeing you. So is it like a centric approach where everything is in a single file, and you just have to go to a single file, and this file will tell you the truth, versus a distributed approach, right? So I could be a bad person here and be saying like, do you prefer a coupled approach or a decoupled approach? Right? Like usually people think about decoupled being better, but in this case, it can be much better, a single source of truth, right? Or much easier to handle at least. Then there will be processes on how to edit this file, of course, because then, well, we all know what happens when you have a centric, or a central hub or piece where you have to manage everything, right? Like suddenly it's like the master branch on your, the main branch on your Git repository, right? It's like conflicts. You need pull requests, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
well, but I think we don't have to dictate either way. So one thing I really, really appreciated about OpenAPI 3.1 is they removed or made optional a bunch of their top level
Mhm.
keywords.
Not sure
And
if it's
so,
just me, but I lost you for like 20 seconds almost.
oh,
So you were
I,
saying like OpenAPI was removing a lot of this top level, make
yeah,
them
they made
optional.
them optional. So you get an OpenAPI file that might only have components in it. So you,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that for your enormous files, you can have paths, you can have components, you can have webhooks. You could put the webhooks in a separate file. You can have paths multiple times. You can split the components over as many files as makes sense for you and then refer to them from the paths or
Yeah.
webhooks. So I think Open Async API also really lends itself to that. Like we don't need to decide if it's one file or many, But I think the question is more, do you want the actors inside the description or outside? Because we'll grow some conventions about how we, if we take the verbs out and think that's probably likely, because it is confusing in most cases to be, is it coming in or going out, when essentially it doesn't matter, you just need to know what it is and it's in motion. And then separately, which thing can this particular player do? Then you can choose whether the actors go here. But I could well imagine having, components in one file, channels in another, or maybe multiple files, and then actors saying, right, so there's for this application, here's our actors file, and it calls out to all the other, it uses that, this, and the other, and those the channels block is published somewhere. Because I think each actor might still need its own file, because the way that the server's stuff is architected, but it might not.
I think it's gonna. Yeah, I get what you say. What you say. I think it's gonna all depend on how you're really doing software in your company. Like, if you're doing microservices, you probably want everything on a single file distributed. But if you have a monolith, you have a single. I mean, don't want to call it a monolith, but yeah, I think the opposite will be a monolith. So let's just stick with this. So if you're working on a monolith or in a single repo, right? It will be much better if you have everything in a single file, right? Or at least a single source of truth. Like, so I agree with you. I don't think we should be dictating if this will be a single file or multiple files, if it will be a centric approach or a distributed approach. So I agree with this. So I think this is a very good point. And I think, I'm not sure. Let me. I have my iPad here, and I always confuse it with my keyboard, and then I start
typing. Nothing's happening.
I'm typing, and I was putting my iPad here in case we had to take notes. But yeah,
that's what the recording's for, right?
I have the recording. So yeah, it's the first time. Bear with me. So we have something like this. It's possible now. I think I know this is also, or it was also possible on OpenAPI, that you can have an empty channels or empty paths in the case of OpenAPI object, and that's like kind of not having it here. But yeah, I think we maybe can do something like this, and that's it. We don't make it mandatory.
And also allowing components by itself. So that one file or multiple files are just the reusable components, and then the rest is composed from that. Because, I mean, as you say, if we've got different sensors doing different things, but they're all doing it in the same payloads on some of the same channels, then that reusable set for multiple nodes in an architecture diagram, to be able to reuse everything except the verb, I think makes a lot of sense. So it moves the reuse from where it is now, where the components are at the message level. It sort of brings it up so they're one level up from there, and they can be reused as a whole with their examples, of course, as well. So I think that's really valuable.
So if I'm understanding correctly, let's just get rid of this. We could be doing something like this from an async API file specific for an application, and we could be pointing to not this, so something like I don't know, my component library.com, right? So exactly. and that's just like include all of them here, and this will be on each async API file, and then you will have all your components in a single place. And same for channels, maybe channel definitions will be also in these components files. So maybe we have to add channel definitions to components so they can be reused. And then you will end up, since well, actually that would be like sure. Well, yeah. So that will be something like, so channel definitions will be in that components library, and then operations will be like channels, channel user signed up, for instance, like here, and it's gonna
Yeah.
be, it's gonna know where to find it because its components has it defined, right? So that will be your website,
Yeah. But I
not
think,
website, sorry.
whether it's for the microservices use case where there can be absolutely loads of microservices, or even just documenting everything that's going on your Kafka broker and trying to keep
Yeah.
things consistent by having it all detailed in one place, making it easy for integrations, making it we're seeing more and more testing capabilities for Kafka coming through the async API route. We've just at Ivan, we've just added a UI feature to let you tag your Kafka topics, because once you've got a few thousand, it's genuinely hard to find them in the UI. And I see Async API as very much in that space of the helper tooling
Yeah.
that helps you to know what you have in terms of topics and understand what the data should look like. And because Async API supports things like Cloud Defense and the Avro schemas, then we can be you've got everything you need for the code generators or just to understand it as an engineer.
Yeah, for the code generation, for discovery, I would say you get everything you need for the event discovery, for even for channel discovery, and for even for applications discovery, like how many services you get around, like publishing or subscribing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. We got everything. I mean, you get everything you need if you use Async API, and it's already possible. But yeah, it's still a pain. So we gotta solve it. And I was thinking about something else, like, because this exact thing happens to me every time I'm working on trying to solve this publish subscribe challenge, and is that I end up thinking how to reorganize things, and people might be wondering, like, okay, but what does it have to do with subscribe and publish? Meaning, right? So it's still confusing. Like, subscribe here means that, are you subscribing as an application? So the website application is subscribing to this topic? Or does it mean that you can, as a client, subscribe to this topic that this application is providing to you?
I think
So
when you
what?
see website and subscribe, the website has to be doing the verb. The thing in
Yeah.
whether it's here at the top level, one file per item on the architecture diagram, or whether we use the actors approach to put all the nodes into one file, where the name of the node is and there's a verb, the node is doing the verb, right? It's like subject object. Yeah.
Yes. So now that works for a broker. But let's say for client server HTTP or client server, because HTTP is also possible with Async API because of server-sent events and other technologies. So now, or with WebSockets if you want, client server. Sorry, sorry. So we need a way to tell the user, the same way that as you do in OpenAPI, that you can subscribe or that you can publish. So we don't want to tell the user that you are publishing and therefore they can subscribe, because that might not be true. Just because you're publishing doesn't mean that the user can subscribe to your messages, because you might be publishing to a private thing that the user doesn't have access to, or you might be publishing to a private broker that only you can publish, but the user can subscribe, but it's in a different address, right? Or it's a different broker that they are all like somehow coordinated, not coordinated, but yeah, let's stick with coordinated. Like,
it's fine.
So the thing is that the endpoint where you're publishing doesn't have to be necessarily the endpoint where the user can subscribe. That's what stopped us to change the meaning of publish and subscribe on version 2, right?
Right.
Because your your application might be published into an internal server, an internal broker. This internal broker is forwarding the message to another broker. That is, this one is accessible for the public, and then this one is accessible for the public, and it has a different address. It may be a different topic name. So you can just tell, like, because I'm publishing here, you can just subscribe and you'll receive it, right? That was a problem. So so I was thinking, and I want to know your opinion here, like, that might be a little bit convoluted or ugly, but what if we just invent two new verbs? Like, so publish and subscribe are like what you said, like the website is subscribing, that's it. So it's the opposite as it is right now, okay? But that's fine. So website is subscribing, or website is publishing.
Yeah.
But if I want to communicate to clients that they can subscribe or publish, I will just do something like client publish or client subscribe. So
But
there
who
will
is
be
the
like,
client in the spider web diagram?
no, that's only for when you don't have this spider web. You have only one-to-one client server, right? That's only in case you want to communicate, in case your application, your website is a server. It's not a client, it's a server. It's an HTTP server, for instance, and you want to tell your users, your clients, that you can subscribe or publish.
I think it would be better to consider, to avoid that special case, and to consider everything as a node on a spider diagram, even if there's only one edge. So that we would write another async API file, or we would have the actors addition. And we would separately say, if you are a client, here is what you can do. You can subscribe to this channel, which is described over there with all of its payloads and stuff. So rather than being like, I'm a server, I subscribe to this thing, you can publish to me, be like, I'm a server, I subscribe to this thing. And then you're a client. Here is what you can do. And keep it very, and I think that makes us also, it feels more distributed.
Yeah. So this is the current approach, actually. Just the birth of publish and subscribe are the opposite expected, right? So that will make it easier for, if we change it, that will make it easier for broker-based architectures, but they will make it harder to understand for client server in this case. But that's exactly what we have right now. But the thing is, let's suppose that we do this. So for instance, we want to communicate the clients. This is a server, and we have clients. This is an HTTP server or WebSocket server, and we want to tell our clients that they can publish. Okay, so this is not the website anymore. This is a website client, right? Because it's just defining the website client, what the website client can do, right? This will be the same as the role, if you want, right?
Yeah.
Or similar, right? So the website client can publish to this, to this channel. But then, if I'm in charge of generating the server and generating the client code, I need to have two async API files, one for my server and another one for my client.
Yes.
This one will be the one that I have to share with my audience, and the other one without this will be what I have to share, to keep for myself for development, right? To develop the server, right?
Yes.
Which is like highly inconvenient in my opinion, like compared to OpenAPI. For instance, in OpenAPI you have just one file, and from that file you can generate the server and the client.
Right.
Because it's clear. The direction is clear. And in this exact case, the direction is also clear. It's the same example as in OpenAPI. So.
Right. But in OpenAPI, we can make assumptions because there are always only two people. So it means that you can generate server code. So it's not it's not for distributed systems. It's one The API description file describes the point of view of the client. It says you can get this, you can post that, you can subscribe to this webhook, whatever. You might receive this webhook, whatever. It's very much from the client side. Because we know that this client must have a server, we can make assumptions about the server and generate code for the server. Because Async API is not like that, right? We cannot make assumptions about other players in the architecture diagram. In a sense, we don't care if there's one server or a broker with 100 other things hanging off it. Async API has to, and currently does, only worry about one thing. It can only represent one node, and it describes what that node can do, whether it's I'm a sensor, I publish data to here, and the data just, all it does is, doesn't care what's consuming it, doesn't tell anyone else how to subscribe. It just, hello, I am a sensor, I publish data. And because that sort of individual responsibility is so tight in Async API, I think that's really important, and that we need to stop thinking that we could ever generate for anything other than the node that this file is for. So we shouldn't be able to generate the clients if we are the web server saying what we subscribe to.
So should we? Why not? I mean, in this exact case, it's the same. It's client server as an OpenAPI. It's exactly the same case.
Because it's a special case. Because it doesn't work for the if we're going to be reusable across the broker architectures, that makes no sense. So then, because each node has like a subset of things. So I think we've always said that the Async API file describes from the point of view of one thing, one node, let's say one publisher. But then it needs to just do that. The weaknesses or the confusion for me in Async API is when we try to say, oh, but in this case, we can also assume this about the server. No, we can't. And that's where it falls down a little bit, because there are other actors, or there can be other actors, because it's a very scalable and distributed kind of approach. So for me, it's either or. If there is a client, must there be a server? And we can assume that there is. Or could this be just one node in a whole spectacle of lots of small nodes? How many things does the architecture diagram have to make it truly reusable? Sorry, go on.
No. It's just
you invited me here to be challenging.
I'm thinking. I'm actually enjoying this conversation because you're making me think. So, there is a proposal from Michael at Solas. Have something like this. Like, I can't remember if it was perspective or. I don't think it's perspective, but yeah, let's stick to this. And you can have this to be provider or client. Okay, so his proposal here was like, okay, we don't know what this website is. If it's defining this publish is like the website is publishing, or the website is expecting the clients to publish. So let's define it here. Like, provider is the website is publishing, and client is the website it is expecting the clients to publish to the provider, right?
Yeah. I think that this whole, are you the consumer or are you the producer, is just like the thing that OpenAPI just had to fix. Okay, I contributed their webhooks functionality, right? But it was like, oh, you are a client. You make requests. And so when we had clients that in fact received requests and responded, the spec was not designed for that at all. And we had to have like a special going in the other direction section added. And it's literally paths repeated with path items and a little bit of different labeling. Right?
Yeah.
Because it didn't support the two-way thing. So for me, if I was rewriting this And I think the actor's proposal is actually a real decoy, because it's about, should you be able to describe a whole system or a single node in one file? It doesn't matter. But this file, the way that I put my example up, I had one node, my website node, which both published and consumed certain things. So maybe some components only consume, but they can publish an alarm. So then if you do at the file level, I am a consumer or I am a producer, that's not how our event-driven systems work. Most nodes, if you think about a Kafka architecture, most nodes mostly do one or the other, but might well do the first thing, or might receive from one channel and redistribute just some sort of information, right? So I think file level, I am a consumer or I am a producer, will bite us later. I think it has to be in this file, you may do this for this and that for that.
So I think you gave me an idea, and well, actually, I think it's actually your idea, but I think
You're welcome
I know where
to
you're
it.
going.
Yeah, I'm not going to fix Async API. You are.
No, we all will fix it. No worries. This is a community-driven work, so that's why we're here. By the way, I forget to tell the audience that they can just jump in into the conversation and make proposals and share ideas. We're happy to take them. And but before I so yeah, let me just come back to what I was saying. The thing with the view here, thanks Lucas for reminding me the name of the property. It's not perspective, it's view, right? The thing with this is that we have things, not here, but on channels, for instance, actually, no, on operations. We have bindings, right? So imagine that we have the HTTP binding. So the HTTP binding, I can't remember exactly. Let me just search for it. But it has something like, yeah, type. So type is, it must be either request or response, right? So let's say that what we're saying here is that when you're using HTTP to perform this operation, it must be a request, right? And by the way, you here mean the clients, the client, right? When the client tries to communicate here to publish, it must do a request. If it will be subscribe, then this must be a response. Like you should expect this message as the response of some other request. We don't know which one, right? So if we define this from the provider point of view, which is what I did here, right? And we switch this and say like, no, this is now client, then this will also be changed, right? I mean, subscribe now, but type response will be changed because now we're looking at it from the other side in a one-to-one relationship on a client server. So that's why and you can find it on the issue, on the discussion. Like that's why I didn't like this idea, because then it's like it's a property that is causing a lot of side effects on the rest of the spec, and that's not good because it's like you easily lose control. And when you're developing new features, you always have to take care of what's this property value, right? That's well, let's try not to have side effects, right? Let's try not. That's why the spec is always using this indented, right? Like syntax, like everything is inside another thing, so it's clear that there's an order, right? It for sure there is another way to do this that is much more readable, but that was intentional, that
It
we follow
works.
this approach, right?
Yeah.
And nested, that's the word I was trying to find. So we remove this, but yep.
This is amazing because I've totally changed my mind on the right way to do this in the course of this conversation. There we go. I'll have to go back and add another proposal.
But no, I mean we'll continue that if you want, of course. But subscribe here. So imagine that we still, because I'm still like, is there a way that we can just have one file in the case of one-to-one relationship client server, right? For simple client server relationship, let's say, is there a way that we can simply just have one file and we could generate the server and the client? Is there a way for that? And I want to explore that option. So can we just do, instead of having the view property here, why don't we just have it on each operation? Kind of like the view, which is the role. And the role is not going to be the actor role, right? So the actor is not going to be either provider or client, because that means nothing to someone new to Async API. Is like, I don't know what you're talking about. So what if this is just like actor client? Even though this is the website, right? Even though this application is for the website, but this specific operation is for the website client. And the website client can subscribe to this channel. Does it make sense?
What doesn't make sense to me is the emphasis on the special case where there are only two actors, because I feel if we could get this to make sense for your microservices case, which it currently doesn't, right? That's the goal of Async API, is to be reusable for all sorts of messaging channels. And we have the bindings to help us. It's, if we could understand it for a distributed system where each node has responsibility for itself, right? That's how distributed systems are made. Then I think it might become obvious how we could do the special case. But for me, I would rather, if I have to have a separate async API file, or with like some kind of extra glue outside it to wire them together, like the hub that I've seen, like the actors change that I recommended here, right? If there's some way of explaining the relationship between all these individual nodes that each have their own async API file, and we can only generate for this node, right? If there's a server node, the server node has an async API file, and we generate from that file for that, and from this file for this. I think if we could get down that route and agree what the abstraction looks like, bearing in mind that these individual nodes might publish to one place having subscribed to another, then your special case will become obvious later. But because we've started from the special case, I think it's the source of the confusion, where it's for the client, except sometimes it's for the server. So if you generate documentation, it's for the client. But if you generate code, it's not for the client, it's for the server. Then it sort of doesn't matter which way you choose it. But that assumption that you must always be a requesting client or a responding server is what we stumbled on and spent a long time trying to decide how to fix in the Open API, which is already the special case, right, with two players. So for me, I think it should go very distributed with the glue inside or outside the Async API spec you choose. But we can't ever make assumptions about any other node than the node that this entry is for.
Not even about the client.
No, because the client is its own thing.
Yeah.
And maybe this client is a client for the website, but is also a client has some extra messaging stuff on the side.
yeah, it might be, yeah, the client might be a client for this API, but maybe it's a client for another API as well, or for multiple APIs. So it's actually using multiple things, multiple
Yeah.
APIs. So yeah, you're right. It's its own thing.
So that's how
So
I ended up with
maybe,
the actors setup. And I'm
yeah,
not, like I say, I'm really not sure if this belongs inside an async API file or if it is somehow outside. And each of
yeah,
these actors is instead an async API file with $refs in it. That's not clear to me.
yeah.
And I also don't make tools for this sort of thing. So we could ask the tools providers what, hopefully they're
I think,
watching, tell us what to do. They might hate us for this, but for the broker channels, knowing what the topics or channels or however we call them are and what the payloads look like is really important. And then it's kind of like a separate thing. Oh, this component sends, this component receives. And we've currently got this like, publisher, subscriber, client server generator, when in fact every node is going to be a mix or potentially could be. And Async API wants to support that.
so that's why you cannot have this. Um, so then we cannot have this information here. Like we cannot assume this is the actor ID, right? Like because
I
the whole thing can be a mix.
The whole thing can be a mix. What we might be able to do is put the channels somewhere and use it like components as like reusable. So here in my example, I had actors and the website was an actor and it had some publish endpoints and some consume endpoints, some
Yeah.
operations. Yeah, one of those. So, but each one of those, I think the bindings also go with the channels, by the way, not higher up. But
There are bindings for the channel, for the operation, and for the message. There are three types of binding.
of
So
course there are. And then you wonder why I'm confused.
no, because they define different things. Like for instance, I mean, in this case, I think it makes sense because some things are for defining the channel itself, topic. Like for instance, you want to define if a Kafka topic has multiple replicas or multiple, um, not replicas because that wouldn't be things about the that wouldn't be related to the API. But let me just be more specific. So, well, in the case of Kafka, there's nothing on the channel binding, but other protocols have things for the channel to configure the channel, and then there's also specific things on how you publish, on how you perform operations to this channel. So to define this, like in the case of Kafka, you have group ID or client ID. Actually,
Mhm.
no. Look, this is something that I found the other day while working on with Kafka, right? So we mistakenly placed group ID here or client ID. I think it's the client ID. Yeah. So client ID shouldn't be here on the operation because
No.
when you create a channel, when you create a new topic, uh, or when you create a client, let's say on your code to reference, yeah, when you create a client, you have to specify the client ID for your client, independently how many topics you publish or subscribe to. So this client ID should actually be on the server binding object, right? It's like I'm gonna be creating a client that subscribes to this server, but then group ID um, will be for the operation. I'm not sure if it will be for publishing. I think so, yeah.
It's a no, it's a
So
consuming thing.
it's only a consumer thing, the group ID, the consumer group.
Or the
Yeah,
consumer
it
group.
makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, it is a
Yeah.
consumer group. Yeah. So yeah, it's only for subscribing, for consuming, right? And then you have things like the message, like to define the key of the message. So they they represent different levels of abstraction, of course. So I think it still makes sense to have this, but and I want to read something that Lucas was saying on the chat. Let me just show you here. So yeah, it's like on operations. The confusing part there is that the file is written for the client. The verb is publish, so I know I can publish, but the operation ID is on user signed up, useful for server code generation only. Don't know if in case you're not aware of this, or someone watching this is not aware of this problem, of this challenge as well, it's also documented, is that when we try to use a single file for defining the server and the client, then this name only makes sense for one of them. Right? It's like
Yeah.
on user signs up.
Yeah.
So imagine that server is waiting for this message. The client is waiting for this message. On user signs up. Then if we look at if we generate the other code, it's like no, it's not on user signs up. It's send user signs up. Right? It's like send it, right? So the other can trigger the event on user signs up, right?
But this
So
is another reason not to have
that's another reason, yeah.
thinking you can know what the server's doing when we've only described the client.
Also, this is just I would like to augment this problem here, is that it's not just that.
Because we need
I'm
I'm getting a clip. I'm getting a clip of that on Twitch. I would like to augment this problem. Okay, good.
I would like exactly.
We don't have enough of that.
description. This is for machine readable. I mean, kind of. But if you have something like description, which is purely human readable and not parsable, unless you have natural language processing, and then what happens is that you have something like when the server, or when whatever we means, receive a message, that the user signed up. This description only makes sense for one of them, like for whoever is receiving the message. But whoever is sending the message, they see this description. It's like,
but that's why I think it's single perspective.
So a single spec, single actor, single node, and then
stop thinking you know what the server is doing.
Exactly. And then now, okay, let's assume this. And then, because I'm thinking on the user experience here, the development experience here, maybe there's a way that we can create some tool that will generate what we think, more or less, your client could be interested. Like, we know the server, I can backport it to reverse the verbs, right? I can reverse the verbs and change the actor name, so it's website client, whatever. And it's like, this is kind of what you need, but you might have to tweak it and mix it with other stuff. So it's just for you not to start from scratch in the new Async API file.
I think it would be amazing to just go all in on it is one file, one node, one perspective, and it's very easy to understand. We can add some tooling later that's nice to have, but I think designing with that in mind has been part of the confusion.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I can see it now. You see, that's why I like this.
I definitely understand why I've been confused, if that helps.
Yeah. Me too. Now I understand why I've been confused as well. Like, I'm amazed by this kind of. I'm liking this. It's episode 1 of Thinking Out Loud, and I'm already loving it. So, so I think this totally deserves the effort of doing more of them. So, yeah, like I can see now how, and I would love to reinforce this. Like, I see many people, and that's totally now not related to spec, right? So I would love to send a message to the audience, to whoever is watching now or later. Some people think that the people that are working on the spec, or an async API in this case, or an open API or GraphQL or whatever, they think we're experts and that we know everything, right? And sometimes they come to us, and it's like, or they look at us like wow, these people are like, wow, rock stars. And no. So I would love to reinforce this, like, no, it's just we're working on this the same way they are working on something else. And I don't know everything. And I don't pretend to know everything. That's why I'm doing this. So I can get more knowledge from other community members. And we shouldn't be trying to know everything, of course. And so please, um, get involved with the community. Don't think that you don't know enough to participate. As you can see, I was highly confused because I was trying to do many things with a single thing. And Lorna just showed me today with her
Yeah, and
face palm
no, that is not
of
fair.
reality,
That's not
right?
what happened. But I also want to echo your message. I'm here. I've done a bit with a sister specification with OpenAPI, and I'm a user of Kafka, but I'm not actively working on Async API. I'm just here to kind of tell my story from my perspective, and I hope that the people watching, whether you're watching the recording or you're with us in chat with the little bit of heckling going on, I hope that you'll also join and follow the conversations that we have in the later episodes of this Twitch stream. And yeah, can't wait to see what happens next.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super happy that that you joined us today. Before I wrap up, I would like to reply to some comments. Rodrigo, who's a friend of mine, um,
Hi, Rodrigo.
left a comment saying "ref underkind." Um, I loved how he asked this with the fewer uh, words as possible.
I can only
It's
assume
funny.
that he's typing on mobile.
Yeah, maybe. So descriptions as well. Well, yeah. So ref under kind, which is funny because kind can mean something different here. So it's not being kind, but the ref. And so if we do something um, like here, is this what you mean? Like we have ref uh, under the kind. Mm, not sure exactly what you mean because here is just a value. It's just um, it's just publish or subscribe. So I'm not sure if it's worth being able to ref here. But if you want to explain us a little bit further, I will be happy to take it. And then he says, applying NLP to comments, natural language processing. So yeah, like I was saying, like description here, that would be
That's a
amazing.
whole separate stream, and I'm not available that day.
To comments and then yeah, descriptions, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's out of the spec scope, right? So yeah, and then Sergio was pointing out that consumer group should also go to server. So in the case of Kafka,
I
might
think
be
there's some open pull requests, I think, for the Kafka binding. So there are a few things. Oh, maybe not. Just some schema stuff. Okay.
from Dale. Yeah,
Yeah, whatever Dale thinks, we need that. And he would also be
exactly.
an ideal. Either Dale or Nick would be ideal
Yeah,
guests for you as well.
I was actually thinking on Dale as well to invite him. So yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm gonna start something. I'm gonna start something new, just completely improvise. And I'm gonna reply also to Sergio, which is Sergio, please open an issue because I don't think we should be discussing this here now. but yeah, I don't know who I'm going to be inviting next. I want to share this with the audience, so I didn't think about it. I wanted to try first with you, and I think um, it's been so good that we definitely have to do it regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I would like to ask you, like, do you want to send a message to the next invitee? think about it.
Yeah. And I think my message is that at this stage in the project, we are so open to the input of people who've tried Async API, and perhaps more the people who've tried it and disliked it, or found it tricky. Because I think those voices are so important. We know that the event-driven systems and the real-time comms are such a growing area. There are lots and lots of people working actively with Async API or looking at it and not sure. So I would thoroughly encourage people to volunteer, let you know that they're available, and to come and take the time to have this conversation in the open, and for us all to be part of it. I really like this format. I think I've definitely thrown out some of my ideas today. But yeah, we've talked about some stuff but there's so much more that we could talk about. We've already ran a bit longer than we've intended to.
Yeah.
So that's my call to action.
Cool. Thanks. Well, Lorna, as you said, we've been it's taken longer than we expected because I was honestly enjoying the conversations
Me too.
and the process, the thinking process. This was really helpful, and thanks for joining me today into thinking out loud. So yeah, thanks a lot, and see you around. Bye bye.
Bye.